Hello ladies and gentlemen, Panzer here, and today we're gonna fall right into Fallout. Why Fallout? Well, this episode is about power armor, and what series has had more iconic stomping suits of metal than the Fallout series. Now, just to be clear, this discussion applies specifically to exoskeletal suits that fully encase the users and not only augment their physical abilities but provide protection as well. So, exosuit frames like those in Call of Duty Advanced Warfare do not fall into this category. At the same time though, the Master Chief's Mjolnir armor from the Halo series actually does fit the description. However, for the purposes of examining the points I'm going to present, we're sticking with power armor as it appears in Fallout 4. With that in mind, here it is, why we can't have power armor. The history of power armor in the Fallout universe goes back all the way through to the first game in the series, although Fallout 4 gives us a good amount of insight nonetheless. According to Fallout 4, all power armor follows the same basic design. It's built using an exoskeletal, self-supporting frame that encases everything but the wearer's head. It even uses a system of hydraulic actuators to move its limbs, and is capable of bearing its own weight even when unpowered. Simply look at the way the armor seems to lock in place when left unattended, and you can see the hydraulic system at work. As is typical of hydraulic systems such as these, the fluid pressure in the limbs keeps the frame upright, allowing it to stay standing. In the real world, the arms of construction equipment such as excavators use hydraulic pistons to move, and we see the same effect when they are powered down. For the most part, the pistons stay in whatever position they are left in, although it's recommended that operators don't actually do that. In fact, over time, as the pistons begin to slowly lose pressure, and this can take up to a number of years in fact, it will eventually begin to droop until it hits the ground. These power armor frames then have armor pieces and equipment fitted onto them in a modular fashion, and the whole system is powered using a miniaturized nuclear fusion battery. While the armor itself certainly is protective, there are a number of issues associated with power armor usage that can also be demonstrated in the game. However, I've managed to narrow down the issues to just 3 main problems with power armor that prevents them from being viable in the real world. The first issue is power consumption. Now, with all the servos and actuators that are used to move the limbs of the frame, and not to mention the equipment that can be added on later, the power usage of typical power armor suits are immense. We can actually see this in the game with how often fusion cores need replacing. Anyone who has played Fallout 4 for any length of time will know how quickly these things run out. Bearing in mind that this is not just any power source, this is a battery that supposedly runs on nuclear fusion. While this is not something that we have in ready supply in the real world, we do have an idea of just how much power nuclear fusion can produce. According to the in-game lore, the typical TX-28 microfusion pack, or fusion core, produces 6,000 watts of power and lasts a maximum of approximately 10 hours. However, more intensive actions such as sprinting will consume more power than normal. Now bear in mind that's 10 in-game hours, not real hours, but that roughly translates to about 20 minutes of constant play, so yeah, they do tend to run out fairly quickly. In fact, the original sets of power armors, I believe the T-45 and earlier, were not powered with fusion cores, but were actually powered using energy cells, which are, for all intents and purposes, just normal batteries, and they would burn through them at an even greater rate. So you get an idea of how much power these things really require. The second issue with power armor is restricted movement. Due to the limitations of joints in the armor, the user is limited to only performing actions that are within the armor's range of motion. For example, the shoulder joints in the armor would visibly prevent the user from raising their arms all the way up, and this is due to the position of the arm hinges as well as the provision for shoulder plates on the power armor frame. And it's important to know that a general rule of armor design is that gaps in the armor can be added for greater mobility at the expense of protection. However, given the intended purpose of power armor in the Fallout universe, acrobatic and agile movement is not as important as damage resistance. But in the real world, this means that a frontline soldier would also have difficulty performing a number of basic functions such as climbing ledges or fine actions such as pushing buttons on a keyboard. And don't even get me started on how you're supposed to swim while wearing this thing. And that brings me to the third and final issue with power armor, and that's just how heavy it all is. As you might expect, jumping into water while wearing the suit will cause you to bullet sink faster than a politician's credibility. Thankfully, the suits are supposedly completely airtight, meaning walking across the seabed isn't a problem, provided it's not so deep that the pressure starts to crush you. Although sinking too fast will cause issues such as pressure-based sicknesses. But even outside of the water, the weight of the armor still does pose a problem. To put things into perspective, the base model T60A power armor weighs 92 pounds, or just under 42 kilograms. And that's before you factor in equipment, ammunition, weapons, and basic supplies. By comparison, the standard infantryman loadout in the real world, inclusive of all supplies, is roughly half that. The hefty suit of armor would not only be a logistical nightmare, since transporting a power armor soldier versus a standard infantryman means accounting for roughly 1.5 times the weight per person, but it would also present tactical considerations that actually negate some of the advantages of dismounted infantry. Considerations would have to be made for terrain when operating with power armor troops. For example, during a beach landing such as those performed by the Marines, the soft sand would cause power armor troops to sink with every step they took. This would not only slow their advance, but would leave them vulnerable if they become too bogged down. The same issue would likely occur anywhere else, wherever there is muddy soil, soft clay, snow, or sand. The weight of the armor would cause you to begin sinking, and fighting it would likely consume more power, requiring more fusion cores to be replaced more often. Overall, it's more trouble than it's worth, not to mention how expensive it would be for any army to operate it on a large scale. But I can appreciate just how cool power armor is, and it's unfortunate that these issues do prevent us from having them in the real world. However, it's worth noting that all these issues are definitely surmountable at some point in the future. So, even though we might not be able to have them right now, it may be possible for them to become viable in the future. Make no mistake, the viability of something is not the same as something being possible. But let me know what you guys think. Could power armor work in real life? Would you want to use it in combat if you had the choice? And if you could design your own power armor, what would it be like? Let me know what you think down in the comments below, and don't forget to leave a like if you enjoyed the video. Also, don't forget to vote in the poll for what you want to see in the next episode, and subscribe if you are new to the channel. My name is Panzer, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.